Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Talking Tents, a RaceSpot TV podcast. Thank you for joining us either live across RaceSpot's YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or Twitter, or through the audio version also released through a podcast app of your preference the very same day. As always, my name is Arjuna Kankipati, and I'm joined by veteran esports commentator Connery Maddock, with Hugo Luis controlling the action from the production room. And we've got an exciting show here for you today. We're going to be joined by the driver currently leading the Porsche Esports Super Cup standings, Sebastian, driver for Red Bull Esports. We're also going to talk about some of the new tidbits that are coming up in the iRacing build, some exciting news released just a few hours ago. But Connery, we're going to dive straight into it. Last weekend, Porsche Esports Super Cup, the round from Spa-Francorchamps, and what a track, and it produced some amazing racing and really mixed up the championship picture.
Yeah, some absolutely incredible action, and it's what we come to expect from that series as well. But of course, we've had the situation where Job, at least in this previous race, taking the double race win, shall we say, which was great. Of course, it wasn't Porsche Esports Super Cup Brands Hatch; it was at Spa. But I just spotted that little error on our little sheet here. But there we go. We will just get past that. But yeah, it's just a lot of drama in that particular event, especially further back behind Seb with Berneke and Rogers.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. But you said for Seb it was a double race win, but it wasn't just the double race win, a clean sweep, getting his first, as you like to say it, fastest lap of the season, and officially confirms Joshua Rogers as winning that Tag Heuer connected watch as well. But I think the important story here is the performance of Sebastian Job. Starting back in 8th position in the initial sprint race, doing a very strong job to, use the draft train, moving to the front of the field. And then he did the same thing in the future race and really controlled both of those races, I thought.
Yeah, incredibly solid drive, and you can see how much I meant to him with his post on Twitter. He felt that he needed results coming into this portion of the season, and what better way to show those results as to grab basically the clean sweep of the entire day. So brilliant stuff, and it's not just that as well. It's the fact that his competitors also had problems, which makes this those races, so amazing for Seb.
Yeah, so securing the maximum 85 points from the weekend, 10 for qualifying, 25 for the sprint race, and then 50 for the feature. But like you say, we'll get onto the action further back in your field, and it was a championship battle that we saw last year a few times, but this time Maximilian Berneke in 4th position in the standings was fighting side by side with Josh Rogers going up into Lecum, and contact was made, and I think it's fair to say, unfortunately for Maximilian in this case, the incident responsibility has to fall on him, and unfortunately for Joshua Rogers, he's now 45 points behind Job in the standings now.
Yeah, it's a move that I can't really find any justification for, because how Spa tends to race. If you're not a good couple of tenths of a second faster than your competitors, you're not really going to be able to pull away, because the draft is that strong. So he didn't need that immediate response into Lecum. He just sent it hard on the brakes around the outside. It was never going to make the normal line for the corner. Had to try and cut across the curb for the second apex, and that spat him out directly into the side of Rogers. And I don't really understand the thinking there. Maybe Seb, as a driver, can maybe chime in a little bit later on to see what he thought about that particular incident. But it was just a hot-headed moment for Berneke that has really put in a huge damper on his championship, as if it wasn't going well already, I suppose.
Yeah, it was already sitting back in 4th position. We talked about a few weeks ago that he was kind of on the bubble of being able to fight for the championship. Well, now he's sitting 105 points back. So for Berneke, it's an incident actually that we saw a very similar incident happen in the F2 race over the weekend as well, with a car, running wide and bouncing over the edge of the curb and taking out the other car on the outside line. But I think, like you say, there's not really any justification for it. However, the one thing that I've heard some people say is that, on the initial entry into the corner, when, they were jostling side by side, there was a little bit of contact, and some people just wondering if, the red mist descended like it can for all of us. And, it's sometimes important to remember that despite the fact that these are some of the best sim racers in the world, that, they're humans, and sometimes they get emotional as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a certain element of that. Sim racers aren't robots. Neither are any sports people part of any sport around the world. You're going to get angry. You're going to get annoyed. But the best drivers tend to try and keep that in check and keep focused. And in this instance, is probably not what we saw. Of course, we can speculate all we want. Max only knows actually what happened inside his head at that moment, but we can speculate. But it's not a great look, and Rogers, quite rightfully afterwards, is going to be super annoyed about how that was all negotiated as well, because he was in a much closer championship fight with Seb than what Max was. And he's lost a bunch of points now. I think thankfully for the both of them, they both didn't drop all the way to the back end of the field, because otherwise that would have been absolutely tragic, and we could say Seb probably has this one in the bag unless Sanchez can give a big challenge towards the end of the season. But they were still able to get top 10 finishes, and they're kind of lucky because that incident could have resulted in a DNF for both of them.
Yeah, and I think Josh was almost 2 seconds off the pace after that incident, so to still finish 7th was a lucky result for him. But nice segue. You mentioned Alejandro Sanchez, and coming in 3rd place in the championship, he needed a strong result to try and close the gap up, but unfortunately, 3 separate incidents with the Coanda team, first getting involved with a little incident into La Source with Mitchell de Jong in the heat race, and then culminating in that last lap incident with Martin Kroenke in the feature race as well. And he's now sitting 389 points, 11 points behind Joshua Rogers. So he definitely benefited from the incident between Beneke and Rogers. However, he's now in this difficult situation where, I'm not privy to some of the post-race results and the stewards' decisions, Connery, but 3 contacts in 1 race, sometimes you just have to assume that the driver might be under a little bit more of a microscope as we head into the final 3 rounds of the season.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation for Alex because he's never been in this sort of position before, at least on the top level of iRacing. We've always known he's quick, but not championship winning quick. And over the last couple of rounds, we've seen his potential, and we've been thinking he could possibly win the championship here. And I think that comes with its own pressures. And I think it probably went to his head in this race. A couple of silly errors. I mean, the fact that they were all Coanda cars is probably a coincidence, considering the amount of Coanda cars in that series. If you're going to hit the car, chances are it's going to be a Coanda one. So I don't think there's any sort of conspiracy behind that. But it was a pretty awful weekend for Alex, as well as Max and Josh. And it seems like Seb is the only one that came out of that one alive.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. Seb's actually, compared to last year as well, he's had such a great season. Other than the small blip in that 2nd round at Barcelona, the lowest he's finished, Connery, is 5th place. And I looked back at the results for last year and just comparing, what kind of was happening. It seems like this season, it's Josh who's having a little bit more bad luck, having a bit more inconsistent results, whereas Seb has been able to just find this, maybe as a result of not, always qualifying at the back end of that heat race and starting back in 8th, but he's been able to work his way through the field a little bit more easily and ultimately seems to have benefited him here. And that consistency over what is a long 10-race season becomes very important.
Yeah, the situation here is that Josh, Josh is 45 points behind Seb coming into this point of the season. Of course, we don't know what's going on in the stewards room, whether or not this will be adjusted. But for those 2 drivers, at least I don't think we'll be seeing any post race action. So assuming 45 points is the gap, that is almost an entire main race win that Seb has as an advantage in the lead of the championship at the moment. And that is a massive gap. And it's a gap that is sorely needed because you never know what can happen inside the final 3 rounds of the season. You can have one of those situations where it's like Josh had at Spa, where it's completely not your fault and you get taken out of the race, especially in a sprint race, because that affects your start position for the main race as well. To be able to have that buffer is a really comforting thing. That means that Seb could potentially have slightly 1 or 2 dodgy races and still be in a good position to win the championship. But I'm pretty sure he'll say that he wants the maximum points gap possible instead of it having instead of the potential for it to shrink a little bit by the time the last round comes around.
Yeah, and so that's the story at the front of your field. So obviously, it looks like Sebastian Job in a much more strong position compared to 2 weeks ago. We take a look a bit further back, and Well, Johan Hart, our first episode of this podcast, Connor, we talked about how much he was struggling this season. Well, another very strong result, third place in the feature. And Johan, from being the third last driver in the standings, is now 19th, which means mathematically he is definitely in with a chance here of securing his place in the championship next year and not having to go through qualifying once again.
Yeah, he's certainly there or thereabouts, isn't he? And it's a good recovery for Johan. He's a really nice guy. He's always capable of these decent results, but the first half of the season was an absolute meh. let's just say that. You had a decent main race result at Catalonia, finishing inside the top 10, finishing inside the top 10 in a sprint race in round number 3 as well, but the past 4 races, 2 rounds, whichever way you want to think about it, he's really, really come to the forefront now, and inside the top 20, which gives him automatic qualification into next season, but it's still going to be quite a task to hold on to that, considering you have some of the other drivers on the bubble, like Mitchell de Jong, who's had a rough season. Let's just say that. You have Kronke, who is just inside that top 20, also having an okay result at Spa as well. So, and there's a couple other drivers on the bubble as well. Patrick Holtzman is there or thereabouts. Jussi Akla a little bit further down that has had some okay results, but he's been caught up in a lot of things further back in the pack as well, which there seems to be a little bit of a cluster most of the time. But not to take away from what Johan Hart has done here, to come back from what was basically the dumpster fire that was the first half of the season, I think that's definitely commendable. And Apex, they've certainly been looking for positive comments recently, considering some of their social media posts, but I'll just leave that be for now.
I mean, we can go ahead and say it, because actually, the MSI esports team, obviously, which Alejandro Sanchez drives for, has been working alongside the Apex Racing team over the last few rounds. And the Apex Racing team had a very good result last time out, Connery, because Kevin Ellis Jr., who's sitting 5th in the standings right now, he's had a very solid season overall, but the first time he gets a double podium finish, 2 consecutive second places, obviously Johan joining him on the podium in the feature as well. A strong result for Apex, and the Apex Racing team is really starting to show their strength a little bit. I think it's fair to say throughout this era of the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup, they've not shown their strength as they did, back in the days with the McLaren F1 car in that World Championship, but definitely starting to show some stronger performances at this point. And as we approach 2 rescheduled rounds, and one of those rounds being Le Mans, where they had a fairly strong performance last time out, I'm hoping to see some more good battling from this Apex team.
Yeah, I think so too. They're always one of those teams that's up there and fighting with the likes of Coanda and Redline and Red Bull. So to see them sort of back for all intents and purposes, at least if we take the last couple of races as our baseline for that point, then that's only positive, because you want that sort of variety at the front of the field. You don't want it to just be Red Bull versus Coanda, or Red Bull Redline Coanda, or anything like that. You want as many teams involved there as possible, and Apex certainly have the capability to do so. It's just some of their drivers have had a bit of a rough first portion of the season, but now they're starting to come alive. Kevin's done a fantastic job, of course. 2 second places in the previous event. That's definitely not one to be sniffed at, and hopefully he can put together some results at the end of the season as well, and maybe solidify himself inside that top 5.
Yeah, and so like I said, 3 rounds still to go. It's going to be the Nürburgring Nordschleife this coming weekend, one of my favorite tracks in the entire world. And we got obviously Circuit de la Sarthe, and then we're going to end it at Monza. So expecting a very chaotic race at Monza. But I think it's a good opportunity now to bring in our guest today, Sebastian Job, leading the Porsche Esports Super Cup, and obviously looking ahead to these last 3 rounds to try and secure his first ever World Championship win. And Seb, thank you for joining us. We're very glad to have you here, and just talk to us a little bit about how the season has gone, because last season was obviously a strong season, definitely. However, I mean, this season has surpassed all expectations, very consistent results, and very consistently being, first place as well, which 45-point gap with 3 races to go. You're in a very strong position. You must be feeling very confident about the season so far.
Yep. Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. But yeah, really good season so far. A lot kind of what I was hoping for when I set my goals for the year. and I think it's a lot of hard work over the break has started to pay off, and it showed. And as a team, we've changed a lot in our approach. Much harder working. A lot more thought goes into it. A lot more time goes into everything. And yeah, it's kind of been a pretty good season. There was one bad round that you mentioned earlier, Barcelona, but other than that, I've been pretty happy with the results. Even when the pace wasn't as good as I'd like, I still could get some solid results. So, yeah, to have a 45-point gap at this point is really promising, and just gotta not let up at all. That's the main thing, because if I do that, then Josh or Alex will definitely start gaining. And we've got Nordschleife this week, and before the race was cancelled, we kind of saw how our pace was, and it wasn't good. So we've been working hard to try and make up for it, but we'll have to see this weekend if it's any better.
Yeah, and I think you said something that's very important there. Even when the pace hasn't necessarily been there, you've been able to get the results. And I think that must speak to some of the work that you've done over the winter to just maybe do some mental coaching as well. I saw on Twitter that as part of the Red Bull team, you have been getting some mental coaching with some of your teammates as well. But, like I say, when the pace isn't there, it can sometimes be a little demoralizing. So to be able to still go out there, get good points finishes, that's something very different maybe to how it went last year. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the winter in general and what you and the team did? Obviously, you got Patrick Holtzman and Graham Carroll in the series as well. What you've done as a team, including some of the other resources you have available to you, through both Red Bull and G2 Esports, what you've been able to do over the winter to really grow.
Yeah, on my personal side, there was a big overhaul in my equipment that I use mainly. That was part of the big difference. But more than that, it's we as a team just realized how much more time we could find if we just put more hours in. We thought we were almost maxed out on the setup, and well, we knew we weren't, because we were comfortably off pace last year. Every single weekend we were showing up and we were like, how are they so much faster? So this year we put in a lot more effort, and we started to find ways to improve the setup, find a bit more pace, and then obviously improving my equipment made a big difference as well, especially wheel and pedals. Just can feel so much more, and also it's more enjoyable to practice. If you've got good equipment, you're gonna want to do more laps, you're gonna have more fun with it. So that helped a lot for me. And then, yeah, like you said, we've done some mental training, but we kind of started that mid-season. I don't remember the exact round where we started, but it's just me and Patrick, and we did, it was either 5 or 6 sessions. We're done now with it. And it was really, really interesting. A lot of new insights into how to approach races. For me, I have to say my performance, like on the day, I wasn't ever too disappointed about that. There was a few times last season where I kind of got the red mist a bit, but I kind of sorted that out on my own towards the end of the season. I had a good run of form, and then it's not really been much of a problem since, luckily. But for me, it was all about keeping the motivation up during practice. It can be quite, I want to say, boring. Not every day is going to go perfectly. You're going to have bad days where you think, or you're just driving terribly, or you can't find the lap time. So it's all about keeping the motivation up, forcing yourself to drive even when you don't want to. And a lot of mental training went towards that for me, and it helped a massive amount. Also, if you're having a rough few days or something, you don't want to drive, you just gotta put that aside and keep driving. So that was a lot of what's made the difference to me this season, I think. I want to put equipment down to it a lot as well. As much as I hate to say it, because everyone wants to think you can win with the cheapest stuff. When you can get to the highest level with the cheapest stuff, there's no problem with that. You can be fighting for wins with a Logitech Driving Force GT, but you're not gonna be consistent enough. And you can feel more of the setup, in my opinion, with a better equipment, more consistent when you drive. And so it's like that last little bit. that made the difference for me that I just couldn't do last year with my old equipment.
So, what was your actual upgrade? So, I'm assuming it sounds like some kind of Logitech, maybe G27, a single screen. And I think now from your social media, it looks like SimuCube 2 Ultimate. You've got nice 27-inch triple screens and Asher Ultimate wheel as well. So, it seems like a very big upgrade, or was it more of a marginal upgrade, but you still found that it was important enough to find those little bit of marginal gains?
Yeah, so last year I was on like a desk in my room with a dining chair, and I had Fanatec CSL Elite wheel and pedals, just one screen. And then yeah, like you said, this year SimuCube 2 Ultimate, 3 screens, Husingfeld Ultimate pedals as well. So we're going for the ultimate rig. But yeah, it just made a big difference with consistency more than anything. You know, I have to admit I did improve my PBs a little bit, but it's more just that every lap you get the same thing, and also every time I sit in the chair, I've got the exact same position. Now, when you're at a desk, you're kind of wriggling about on the straights to get your seat back in the same position for the next corner. Whereas now I sit in that chair and I know exactly what it's going to be like, and so the consistency is much, much better because of that. And yeah, just the forces you can feel through it. You can be more aggressive with changes because you can feel it more. And yeah, that's the main kind of. It was quite a big upgrade then. Like I went from, I want to say, medium range for the rig. You know, I think Fanatec's kind of medium range to pretty much the highest you can get. I don't think there's, in my opinion, it's the best wheel on the market. And same for the pedals. So I went for, you know, my attitude was very much, if I can go from third to first in a championship, then I've easily paid off the investment for getting all the wheel and pedals. So I think of it as an investment, which is why I wanted to get the absolute best stuff.
Yeah, and thanks to our producer, those watching on our live video stream were able to see a video of that setup going around the Nordschleife as well. And I think one thing that I noticed was just how much you're getting the forces of the wheel, bouncing around, especially in a car as bumpy and bouncy as the Porsche 911 Cup car. And one thing you did say was that you found over the winter that was a lot more time to be found in setups. Now, obviously, you can't reveal any of your secrets there, but I think a lot of people maybe look at the setup options on that car and don't necessarily think there's a lot you can do in terms of finding the optimal setup. Can you kind of just talk a little bit about the approach you guys had over the winter to try and find more speed and why you ended up maybe struggling a little bit more last year? Was it just, like you said, the time commitment, or were there other factors involved that were causing that speed discrepancy?
Yeah, so you look at the setup and there's not much to change, and we thought the same thing. It's a very limited car in terms of setup options, but it just comes down to fine-tuning it. And so I personally find it takes me a few hours to like kind of learn a track to get to the point where I can do the same lap time over and over again without hesitation. That's for me the main thing. And then from then on I can start to fine-tune a little bit more. But I don't it's like, I think we got to the point where we started to get the setup to where we felt like it had a good balance, but then we didn't really push it. We didn't start to experiment with different settings, and so we ended up on a very similar setup throughout the season, whereas now we're exploring a little bit, kind of testing the limits, and not to say anything, but it's just more about exploring, kind of having a bit of an experiment. And that's sometimes where the time, so most of the time, like 99% of the time, it's complete crap, and you just get really frustrated, and then you just go back to fine-tuning what you had before. But yeah, and that, I think Zandvoort, where we showed up with a really good setup, kind of showed this really well. We showed up on race day with there was 5 of us working together, 3 of us in Red Bull, and Jeff and Brian. And I think Brian had 60 hours of practice, Jeff had 50. I think I was on the lowest with 35 hours of practice, which is by far the most I've ever had for a race. and it was just the five of us just made, in my opinion, the best setup I've ever driven. Like, it was so close to perfect. I don't want to say it was perfect because, you know, it's probably impossible, but and that was just so many hours put into it. And then obviously you can't sustain that over the season. It's just impossible. But it was just, it's a lot of hard work. That's the main thing. And for most people, they can't justify it because they don't have the time to put into it. But, you know, you can get a setup like two temps off what we're using with like a couple of hours. It's just those tiny last bits that aren't going to make a difference to most races. You know, if you're doing your weekly race on iRacing, you probably, those 2 temps, you can probably win without them. So it's once you get to that high level that you have to really start putting in the boring hours to find that last tenth or two.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to go back over your history with iRacing in particular, but we'll get onto the other stuff a little bit later on. Of course, you joined the iRacing World Championship Grand Prix Series. 2015 was your first season. Of course, you were part of the Apex Racing Team outfit for a good couple of seasons before moving to G2 Esports, and of course that got absorbed into a current team of Red Bull Racing Esports. You were one of the drivers that was one of the youngest, if not the youngest, to ever compete in a World Championship Series event, and sometimes that does come with its own challenges. Of course, we've also had Josh Rogers, who was a particularly young WCS competitor as well. Do you feel like you've matured a lot since then? What exactly have you changed about yourself since those very, very early days to make the Seb job that we have right now?
Yeah, I think I just improved in every single way. Like, not to like sound arrogant or cocky, but it's generally, you just improve everything. I like, mainly, of course, the difference being that my driving is simply better. You're just gonna get better with time. You're not gonna get worse, unless you're like, you start getting old and you lose your reactions. But I don't think that's even a big thing with sim racing anyway, because in my opinion, most of racing is predicting rather than reacting. So I like, it's mostly just more driving. Like, I just, you're gonna get better with time. You know, you can say, oh, you upgraded your equipment, but like, you're just gonna get better with time. It's simple as that. And obviously, getting help from Red Bull with mental stuff makes a big difference as well. I've tried to work on my physical condition a bit as well, just to kind of keep the heart rate more controlled, have a better control of my body. That's quite a big thing for me over the winter that changed. But it's and obviously mature as well, because I think when I first got into the World Championship I was 15 and now I'm 20, so it's, in 5 years you change a lot. I've changed completely as a person, so that probably helps. I'm more driven and more competitive than I was back then, and I'm a lot more mature. So it's you know, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but the biggest thing is just you drive more, you get better, you learn new things by driving. You see a mistake, but it wasn't a mistake. You gain time from it. Therefore, you're like, oh, okay, I found some time doing that. I'm gonna copy that, and you just get better and better with more driving.
Yeah, and of course we've loved seeing your development ever since 2015, even before that as well. I remember you were on some of the RaceSpot broadcasts, and always a talent. And just look at you here today. You're leading the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup, looking to try and take home that title at the end of the season. But we'll see how your competitors, see if your competitors have anything to say about that. Mm-hmm. But of course, it's not just iRacing that you've been really into as far as sim racing is concerned. You also were a finalist in the 2019 World's Fastest Gamer as well, where you had that opportunity to do this huge documentary series with traveling to California, Las Vegas. That must have been an incredible experience for you. Just take me through sort of your opinions of that, because it did look, as someone who just followed it on social media, it seemed like you guys were having a time of your life out there.
Yeah, I mean, everything you saw on social media was like exactly what we did. It was so much fun. I still consider it's probably the best 2 weeks I've ever had in my life. Just the things we did. You know, almost every day we were driving race cars. Like it was just an awesome experience. And you know, you're spending 2 weeks with the same people. You're gonna start to develop friendships as well. You're gonna get friendly with people. You're gonna have a lot of fun together. And yeah, so just 2 weeks of pure enjoyment. Really, there was a lot of long drives, a lot of camera stuff, but I think the trade-off was kind of worth it. You know, you got to drive race cars, like I said, almost every day. I drove a Lamborghini on like I want to say like the second or third day. Like it's just crazy stuff. And you know, for me, like going to America was a big dream of mine. To especially that area. So we went to Vegas and then we went all through California. And even though you're competing, you're still trying to enjoy it. I didn't go there just to compete. That was the main focus, obviously, but I still wanted to enjoy myself, and we definitely did that. So yeah, it was everything that you see on the social media. It was, yeah, there was no faking it for the camera, really.
And
yeah, you had sorry, Connor. You had a big smile there, Seb, when you started talking about that entire experience. Like, right now, that face, it just looks so happy, and it must have just been awesome. Like you say, you drove the Lamborghini on day one. You drove a bunch of other race cars. You got to get a hot lap around, I believe it was Thermal Springs, from Juan Pablo and Montoya. It just seemed like a very fun experience, despite the fact, like you say, that you were competing. Everyone there, the 10 guys, definitely looked like it was having a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun, and then kind of in the evenings, I always felt that bit of pressure as well. There was a weird mix, and when I think back to it, I really can't think of anything similar. It was like you were having this fun, but at the same time, there was just this massive weight on your shoulders, all this pressure all the time. Even though you were having fun, it was a really weird feeling. Like every time we went back to the hotel, there was always something feeling a little bit off. Just kind of, you know, worried about how did today go? What did the judges think? And I was sharing a room with James most of the time, and James was doing really well. So it was quite a stressful experience as well as being fun. But you know, I still had an amazing time. I'm hoping I get to qualify for it again if they do it again. I'm pretty sure they're doing it again this year. So yeah, it's kind of, you see all the fun stuff, but then at the same time, it's a lot of stress for people competing, and I think the others would say that as well. Just kind of whenever I think back to it, I just remember this feeling of like anxiety almost. You know, you're always feeling anxious about, I need to drive so well today, especially when we were driving these sprint cars that looked like they wanted to kill you. You know, the death traps, these cars, and I was so nervous beforehand, not just because I was worried about dying, but I really needed to do well. And it's so like, you've got all this pressure of, I have to drive really aggressively, push myself as much as I can, and at the same time, you know, it's just a brand new experience. You, like, most people don't hop into a sprint car and have to go like as aggressive as possible. You know, it's quite something to have to deal with.
Yeah, that was an absolutely crazy thing, because you know, obviously there wasn't any like live broadcasts of it that we could watch and see you as you go along. We all had to try and piece things together from social media and just try to see how everyone was doing. But in the end, of course, you know, it was that big $1 million valued prize for, you know, for the winner. That did end up being James Baldwin, and you said you actually shared a room with him throughout the tournament. And was it pretty tense on that final night before the big final, or was he and you pretty cool with everything?
I don't remember it too. I think we were pretty chill, to be honest. But yeah, I don't remember it too. I want to say we were sharing a room the night before the final as well. But it was. Yeah, it was kind of chilled out. I think everyone just wanted to kind of go to sleep and get ready for tomorrow. I think we were all pretty tired. As if I remember right, the day before the final, we were driving to Vegas. So it's quite a long drive. So I think we were all pretty tired. That's the thing. Like a lot of time when you went to the hotel, you just kind of wanted to keep to yourself because you wanted to go to bed. You were pretty tired after the whole day. But yeah, there was definitely a bit of tension like with everyone, I think. But overall, it wasn't too bad.
Well, there we go. Iona, unless you've got anything else, then we can
No,
move
I
on,
mean,
perhaps.
I actually want to ask one more question about the world's fastest gamer, because obviously you're on a team with two of the guys you're now competing with, almost on a weekly basis, Mitchell de Jong and Maximilian Beneke. And I'm just curious, what was the atmosphere like there? Because you've got a few of you guys, obviously, who are all competing in iRacing. Then you've got some of the other guys who qualified through, other platforms, including like the mobile game, for example. So very different backgrounds. Did you guys the three of you guys kind of talk together quite a lot and kind of compare notes? Or I understand it's a tournament at the end of the day and you're competing against one another. But again, teamwork is important. And, those first few rounds, it was definitely about being the best driver on your specific team. So just curious what the dynamic was like with some of the drivers you're competing with now.
Yeah, we all got along really well actually. I didn't we didn't speak too much about what are you doing in this corner, what are you doing there. I spoke a lot.
We want some drama, Seb. Give it to us.
I know. I'm afraid there wasn't much. It was we all got along so well, and you'd think, you've got people that are competing against each other all the time. You think they wouldn't get along, but the truth is that Max and Mitchell, the two that I compete with, are both like such nice guys. So we got along really well. Obviously, you don't want to lose to them or you're trying to beat them all the time, but it was that's what made this 2 weeks so amazing, I think, because we all just got along so well. There was no arguing or anything like that, and that just made the experience a lot better. The only person though I did like kind of speak about the driving side to was Aurelian, just because he was my teammate in Red Bull, so we were kind of exchanging advice every now and then, but I tried to not give anything away to other people, just as hard as it is, because they're like, oh, what did you do here, what did you do there? But yeah, it no drama though, I'm afraid.
Damn, can't get those spicy tweets out.
Exactly. I was waiting to be able to tweet some clips of this, but obviously the prize that you were fighting for had some significance to you, because obviously the World's Fastest Gamer was leading up to the drive in 2020. However, you won the JMR scholarship back in 2018, competed in a season of Formula Ford, and obviously, as far as I could tell, Seb, that was the only real racing experience you've had to date so far. And I have to assume that the drive to enter World's Fastest Gamer, not just because it's such a prestigious tournament in other ways, but that drive, the paid drive at the end of the season in a GT3 car, that must have been a very big motivation for you, given that I think you really enjoyed that experience in Formula Ford. Yeah,
I mean, for me, when I first started sim racing, it was because we couldn't afford to do karting more. Like we did like rental karting. It was very low level and we couldn't afford to do anything more. But for me, like the whole point of sim racing was to find an opportunity to get into the real thing again. In 2018, I kind of did that with Formula Ford, and it was an awesome year. And so this was kind of my second chance at that, because as much as I like loved the year in Formula Ford, it didn't lead to anything afterwards. Whereas this is more of it's like another step. It's a bigger level. It's a higher level. And so I was really hoping to win, just to get back into the real thing. Because once you've started, you don't want to stop. It's like once you got a taste for it, you're not gonna stop wanting to do it. And so for me, that's still the goal. Any competition that has a chance of a real life drive, I'm probably going to be interested in it. But yeah, so that was a big motivator for me. And yeah, fingers crossed something else comes up. That's why I want to do it again this year, if it goes ahead and if I can get an invite. I think if kind of one of the motivators for winning Porsche as well this year would be, I think they'd probably invite the winner of the Porsche Esports Super Cup, because I believe they invited Josh last year. I might be wrong on that.
The prize giving ceremony where they give prizes to all the different Porsche series that run. It's a officially endorsed series by them, so you'll probably get to go to that event. COVID notwithstanding, though.
Yeah, but so I was meaning with World's Fastest Gamer, I think.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
I
right.
think they invited. That's one of the motivators, because I think they invited Josh for winning that. Because they also invited Mitchell and Max, and they were top 4. Then they invited me as well. So I feel like Josh was probably invited and he didn't accept it for some reason. I might be wrong on this, but if you perform well, you're likely to get invited. So if there's another chance of doing that, then that's kind of the motivator,
Yeah, 'cause
or one of the motivators.
I was wondering why Josh didn't get an invite, so he must have turned it down, because I bet
so.
that he did get one, but
It'd be silly if he didn't.
we'll get him on the show at some point and see if we can get it out of him. But
I'm just going to speculate here. I wonder if the timing just conflicted, because I think around that time frame he was probably moving to Germany in the Coanda house, so maybe just timelines conflicted there for him. But going back to the Formula Ford experience, one question I did want to ask you: I saw that you had a decently big wreck at Brands Hatch, and how did that affect your confidence about the entire season? Because I think crashing in sim racing is one thing, right? You reset, you go back to the pits, and you head back out. But when you're on the track, there's a lot. Having done an amateur race myself, and I didn't crash. My front left wheel decided to depart from the car. I can attest to the fact that you definitely feel a little bit down and worried. So how did you respond back to that and build up the performances for the rest of the season?
I'm not gonna lie, I had quite a few crashes during the season. It wasn't a one-off. So not all of them my fault, but quite a few were. I really struggled with. See, almost all of the crashes came as a result of something to do with the H-pattern gearbox. Like I would miss a blip on the downshift. That's what happened. Actually, I'm not sure if the Brands Hatch one was, but a lot of the time it came from messing up a downshift because I was learning how to heel toe. But
oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it was really tough. I've struggled a lot with that, but I think it didn't bother me too much. I didn't care about crashing. I wasn't scared about getting injured. That didn't bother me. But the biggest worry was all the damage costs, and that affected my driving a lot. I was very scared to make any mistakes for that reason alone, because we just couldn't afford it. And even though we got told it was a fully funded season, they kind of slipped that in on the last day. Oh, you have to pay for all the damage. So it was really not good in that aspect, and that caused a lot of problems for me with just the driving. Just because you don't want to put all this burden on your family to have to pay for the damage. We did manage to get a sponsor to help with that as well. But yeah, it was a pretty difficult to deal with that. Like I said, though, I did not care about crashing in terms of injuring myself, which is probably a bad thing, but I wasn't too bothered. I actually broke my thumb at Alton Park with a crash, which was somehow didn't have much damage to the car, but I think the worst one was at Donington, where there was a crash in front of me and I couldn't avoid it, and I think my right front wheel just went straight up in the air, and almost, it was quite close to my head actually, so it could have been quite a bad one. But yeah, there was quite a few crashes over the season, but it was just the damage that I was worried about, the cost of damage.
And so one reason I was kind of asking you about this experience is, obviously, the world's fastest gamer isn't just about being the fastest driver on track. There's so much more that goes into it, right? It's about the physical, you went through a series of physical training, the mental aptitude as well. But I have to assume that you've learned a lot now as a result of going through the JMR scholarship, going on doing that full season, now having done the world's fastest gamer competition. And I have to assume that's also something that's really helping you now as you continue to compete and continue to grow at this point. And again, it's not just about being the fastest driver on track. And I think that's something that you definitely have shown this year. It's what you said right off the bat. Even when the pace in the car wasn't there, you managed to get the results. And that's what ultimately it makes a championship winning driver.
Yeah, I think it all helps. It's all experience. It's all kind of confidence growing. I changed a lot as a person in the year of Formula Ford. Which really helped me with my racing. I just became a lot more confident, and that translates over to sim racing, even if it's personality stuff. You want to be a confident driver. And I think winning a competition where it's you're number one in the UK, you beat everyone else in the country, that gives you a lot of confidence. So that will it all adds up. It all makes a difference to your driving. I know if I went and did the season again, there's so many things I do differently. There's so many things with World's Fastest Gamer as well, that I would probably do a bit differently. You just learn so much, and I think if I hopped into a car again, I'd learn a lot more as well. And every time, but I feel like if I hopped into a Formula Ford now, I'd do so much better. And so you change a lot, and it didn't really it made a bit of a difference with the sim racing, but it's more just the like you said, the mental side that I think makes a difference. Being more confident as a person, being more determined as well to win more. To once you've had that taste of what you can get from winning, it motivates you more and more. And so I think that's where a lot of the benefit of doing that stuff came from. It didn't teach me too much with my driving, to be honest. It kind of enlightened me in what is wrong with sims. You have to drive a lot more aggressive in the real car, at least compared to iRacing. I've started to learn what's wrong with iRacing, what's wrong with R Factor, what's wrong with Assetto Corsa, and so I can almost get a feel for what I should be doing differently when I get into the real car, which is a nice help. And it kind of it opens your eyes about how you could drive differently as well on the sim, but most of the time nothing comes from it really. It just doesn't work. Like in the real car, you're a lot more aggressive on the brakes than you are in iRacing, and if you did that in iRacing, it's just not going to work. You're just going to overheat your tires. So you learn stuff, but it's not always applicable, and that's the problem.
You actually read my mind there, because I was actually just going to bring up that fact. I read that you said exactly the same thing, that in the real car you have to be a lot more aggressive, and that's kind of why I'm very interested to see exactly how, if you do end up back in the World's Fastest Gamer, the second time around, with a little bit more experience in the real car. We're seeing some clips of you right now, side by side as well, sliding the car around. I just think you're that much more confident, you're that much more prepared, and we're going to jump in to talk a little bit more specifically about Red Bull and G2 Esports in a second. But I feel like, if you go back, you've said it, you're a completely different person to 5 years ago, but growing up basically in this pressure cooker of a situation, I think it's really developed a driver. I'm not trying to inflate your ego here or anything, but
keep going.
I'll keep going. I definitely think, Seb, that I've been super impressed this season by everything, the way you've approached all the races, watching your racecraft. Other than one small mistake, I will say, in Brands Hatch and the turn 2 in the feature race, when you got a little bit wide, you lost a little bit of positions.
I actually got hit there, just for what it's worth. I got hit wide.
You see, so there you go. I've been super impressed this season, and let's just talk about Red Bull and G2 Esports as well, because the team is giving you a lot of support. You've been, on iRacing since 2015, but only 2018 is when you joined the G2 squad, as it was back then, eventually rolled into Red Bull Esports. But you're now part of a global team in many ways, right? Because G2 Esports, obviously very big across the esports scene, but then Red Bull Racing, there's not many teams in sim racing that can have that kind of backing behind them. So we talked about the mental coaching a little bit earlier. What are the other things that you guys have? Because you obviously don't just have the iRacing drivers, you have drivers across other simulators, other games, and then do you end up working at all with the likes of Max Verstappen and Alex Albon as well?
Personally, I haven't, but I know Marcel has been doing a lot of stuff with Alex when they were doing all the F1 races. But there's a lot of support in other ways that Red Bull provides. Not for me, with the example I'm about to say, but last year for the F1 Esports, it was all in London. And so what they would do is they'd fly out a week or two before, and they'd have a boot camp in, I think it was Twickenham Stadium. And they'd just be practicing there for like a week or two just to prepare for the event. And I think that's awesome. You don't get that with many other teams, really, the level that they're going to just to find every little last bit of time. And I think it's October, I'm going to the Red Bull Performance Center in Austria. I think there's a couple of other guys that will be doing that as well for the F1 esports, just to find every single last bit of performance with us. I'm not really sure what to expect from it, but it's, there's stuff that you're not going to get in other teams, so I'm all for it. It's the extra support you can get, and also just to be able to do it as a job, full time without, it gives you unlimited practice basically, and that's a big help. I think when the level gets to this point, you need to be able to put lots of hours into it. So that's where Red Bull come in, being able to support me in that, and that's a big kind of weight off your shoulders as well.
Yeah, because it's something that we've seen. Obviously, it's basically a Red Bull Racing Esports and a G2 Esports partnership that's going on there in the background, and G2 in particular. They're this huge esports organization, have teams in League of Legends, Counter-Strike, whatever esport you decide to throw out there, they probably have a team in it. Has that been help from like the esports side of things? Do you have much contact with the G2 organization as a whole, or is it mostly everything being done through Red Bull instead of G2?
To be honest, it's now almost all done through Red Bull. It's kind of, there's been a slow shift, and Red Bull are taking more of a hold over the project, which is awesome because we get more opportunities, like, for example, going to the Performance Center in Austria. So mostly G2 aren't too involved, but it's still like, there's a few contacts, and Carlos, the CEO of G2, he's getting into sim racing a bit recently, so I've spoken a bit of him about that. But mostly not too much contacts with them, but there's not really been much need for it. There's not been too many crossover situations really, so but yeah, it's not a big thing. At least I don't think it would be a bigger difference to, I don't think we're missing out on much from something that they could provide.
Well, their whole director of esports is Danny Engels, he went from just managing the sim racing team up to managing the entirety of G2 Esports. So we have a sim racer in high places, I suppose.
Yeah,
but
he upgraded big time.
Yeah, he did. It seems so from his Twitter. But I did see a question from the YouTube saying, when are you going to stream again?
Oh man, I keep getting asked. I don't really know. Since I upgraded my setup, I have 3 screens now, and my PC can't stream at the moment. It's, as soon as I start streaming, I notice a difference in PC performance. It's not good enough. So until I upgrade my computer, which hopefully after Porsche ends, I should be able to do. And then depends if I'm in the mood for it, to be honest. Because streaming isn't for everyone, and I enjoyed it at times, and other times it just wasn't as enjoyable. I'd really like to stream the World Championship races, but that would take a lot of preparation because I have a very set routine on race days, and I don't want anything to interrupt it. So if I'm dealing with streaming problems on a race day, it's not going to go well. So it's tricky, and also I don't want to put any time that I could be practicing into streaming. A lot of people, Max tried to do that for the start of the season, and he just stopped streaming completely. He's not been seen streaming for months now, and I think that's one of the main factors. You just can't practice as much, and the performance is more important than the streaming for me. So it will happen. It's just maybe not for a few more months.
Yeah, well, I think the practice is so important. You mentioned Brian Lockwood doing 60 hours of practice for that first PES ground, so definitely important. A little bit more curious on the Red Bull side of things as well. How does it work in terms of, you've got the F1 esports team, which I know you tried to compete for as well at one point. How much sharing is there between all of those guys? Because I know, for example, Marcel does race in iRacing from time to time, driving, the F3 car and whatnot. Do you guys kind of talk about things on the mental side necessarily to try and share some of the things that, you've managed to gain from your experiences at the World Fastest Gamer, and, maybe learn a little bit from them as well?
We're all in our Discord together, but I have to be honest, most of the chat in there is just talking nonsense, really. It's just friendly, normal talk. I think when you get to the performance level, you know, talking about setups and mental stuff, we end up just sticking with for me, the iRacing guys, the F1, we'll stick with their guys. Because we're not really going to be in a situation where it comes up in conversation. Every now and then maybe something gets put in the group chat and you'll have a quick chat about it, but not a huge amount. I did speak quickly about the sessions that I had with Patrick. I spoke about them with Marcel briefly about it. Just, is it worth it? And I said, yeah, but you have to be committed to it. But I think we kind of will keep it to our own little zone. Not because we don't want to share anything, it's just because it doesn't come up in conversation. If someone wants to know something, like, that's not a problem. Everyone's gonna be sharing stuff within Red Bull. It's not a problem.
It sounds like a fun team environment, to be honest. And just want to ask you one more question before you leave, because you mentioned it, and I like to hear about routines and things, because I'm very similar when it comes to competition. I like to make sure I have a set routine. What's your routine like on a World Championship race day? It's been, 5 years of competing, and I guess you've been refining that process, every time you learn something new.
Yeah, I think it was last year I started to take more notice of it and started to get almost not superstitious, but I started to have certain things to do at the earlier in the year, and I think end of last year I would always go for a quick run before races, but then I've started to change my attitude towards, doesn't matter what happens on race day, I'm still going to perform. I know I can perform, but I still want to have these certain things. I have certain socks that I have to wear on race days because they're very thin. I want to feel everything. I always have to wash my gloves one day beforehand, make sure they're as comfortable as possible. I do struggle to eat on race days as well, so I have to kind of remind myself to eat because the nerves I get, it just makes my stomach feel horrible. I just can't. I have that butterflies feeling all morning and just until before the race. And that makes you not want to eat. So I have to kind of remind myself that I need to eat just for performance. And then it's in driving side, I'll always wake up, warm up for a bit, normally with qualifying runs. Then I'll do a full practice race, so qualifying or warm up, qualifying, then the 50-minute race, then the 30-minute race, and I'll do all that without trying to skip any steps or anything, just to double check fuel as well. And then after that, I don't really drive too much before the actual session. I see everyone driving right before the session's about to cross over, and at that time I'm listening to music, trying to get zoned in and relaxed in a way. So I'll probably 30 minutes before the session goes up, I probably won't even start driving unless there's something I need to do specifically. So I don't want to overdrive. I don't want to drive too much and then get burned out on race day. So there's a lot of thinking that goes into it, probably a bit too much, but I try to remind myself that no matter what I do, I'm still going to perform. As long as as long as I think that, then it should happen. So yeah, there's a lot of steps to it, but I don't know how much it all matters really.
Well, clearly it's all working for you. Like we said, leading the current 2020 Porsche Esports Super Cup by 45 points. And Seb, thank you for joining us. It was great. You gave us some great insight to the mental side of esports, which I don't think we've really explored with anyone so far. And I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot about what you had a chance to learn during the World's Fastest Gamer. So thanks for joining us, and good luck for the last 3 rounds of the season. And maybe we'll see you at the end of the season again after winning the championship. So yeah, good luck for the rest of the season.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a really fun little podcast. So yeah, thanks.
That was Sebastian Job, 45 points clear of Joshua Rogers in the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup. And Connor, we got 2 quick topics that we're going to discuss before we wrap here. And we kind of previewed this in the last episode of the podcast when we talked about Dane Warren being spotted testing with the Coanda team. However, a little bit of a social media game played by Coanda team there. They teased the top 5 driver in the Super Cup joining their team a few weeks ago, and well, everyone thought it was Dane Warren. In fact, it was Aichan Guvan joining Coanda team. Has drives for Team Redline in the past, but now joining up with Coanda. And then a week later, the news finally came through. Dane Warren is part of the team. Unfortunately, though, his first race in the Porsche Esports Super Cup as part of the Coanda team, fortunately had some power and internet issues that effectively meant that he finished right at the back of the field with getting no points. He's still in 6th place, though. 2 very strong additions to the Coanda team, though.
Yeah, Dane is logged as a did not start for the Spa event, which is unfortunate because he's been getting top 10s all season and is a very consistent driver overall. So he would have been an absolute asset to Coanda in that race. But thing is, sometimes, it's just the nature of sim racing and the nature of esports. Sometimes the technical side doesn't go your way. We know that as part of RaceSpot as well. So it's sometimes those gremlins do come up. But hopefully for the last 3 rounds, he'll be able to show us what he's made of, get some more top 10s, and he's 6th in the point standings right now, and on the edge, about 10 points behind Kevin Ellis Jr. for P5, so a P5 would be a fantastic result for him. But moving on to the other driver, though, Aichan Guvan, of course, real-life Porsche Super Cup driver. A great crossover opportunity for Coanda, I suppose. We also know that as well, Porsche likes to work with these sim racing teams as well, because they've teamed up with Redline with the Porsche 24 stuff, and they've done stuff with Coanda for Virtual Le Mans, for example. So there's sometimes a bit of crossover there. But Guvan, solid driver. He hasn't had the best of times as far as the esports Super Cup is concerned. Of course, he was a competitor last year, I believe it was, coming into that one. So I'm not actually seeing it on my list right now as far as current competitors. But we'll see how this goes. It's a further partnership, I suppose, between Porsche and sim racing teams that. We'll have to see how it goes from here. Of course, there are some slight questions that some people have raised about potential conflicts of interest, but I'm sure that will be less of a factor here in this one.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Obviously, the VRS logo starting to get placed on a few more real cars. Obviously, Sindre sets us in the Nürburgring Langstracken series, if I got that name right. He's been running with a VRS logo on his BMW M24i, and I assume now Aichan will have that VRS logo as well. But the more interesting thing about this move, Connery, in my opinion, is that Aichan is going to be moving into the Coanda house, and he's taking, well, it's not that he's moving in, he's already actually spent some time in the Coanda house. However, he's taking a bedroom that was intended for Mitchell de Jong to at one point come and, occupy. Unfortunately, the last few months have precluded that from happening, but now it seems like there may be an opportunity here, in my eyes, if I'm thinking big picture, to maybe have the Germany Coanda house, and then you can have a US Coanda house, because obviously there are a lot of Coanda guys on the oval side as well.
I don't know what the funding looks like for Coanda at the moment, but it's not outside the realms of possibility. We've seen this in some other esports as well. It's, the team house concept is definitely a thing. Whether or not it's a healthy thing for those involved is a different question, considering you don't have that work-life separation in a lot of instances. But no doubt kind of probably tried to figure out if there's a way around that, because like I said, this is not a foreign concept as far as esports is concerned. Whether or not they want to expand into the US and have some of their oval associated guys come and join them in that aspect as well, might work a little bit differently for the US. You know how it is, living there. It's the distances can get quite large from one end of the country to the other, and even inside the same state sometimes. The luxury of living in Europe is that everywhere is a decent drive away, possibly. It's not going to be a foreign concept to Americans to drive 5 hours, but you drive 5 hours in Europe and you cross 3 borders. It's it's not a problem. But we'll see how this goes from here. I think Coanda will definitely continue to expand, considering they're, apart from maybe Team Redline and maybe Williams, probably one of the better funded sim racing teams out there, especially privately owned that don't have massive backing from a major company. Of course, they have that VRS backing, but it's not like a major corporation, is it? So, considering that they tend to do very, very well, and onwards and upwards from here. I'm not sure, as far as Guven is concerned, what benefit that would bring to him coming into the house. Maybe he can just sort of absorb by osmosis the the knowledge from his peers and from his teammates. But as far as his runs in the top level of iRacing is concerned, it wasn't championship winning sort of performances. So maybe that'll change. Maybe he'll get himself qualified into the next season of the Porsche Tagoya Esports Super Cup. Of course, wasn't taking part here in 2020. He was in 2019, though. However, but I think Coanda will definitely push him to requalify. He definitely has the pace to be in the series. Whether or not he has the pace to take race wins is a different issue. It's the same issue with Warren.
And I hope Guven doesn't mind me saying this, but the only time I've really seen him in sim racing to date, other than the Porsche Virtual Super Cup, which we did over here on RaceBot TV, which was he did very well in, but obviously competing against a field of real racers jumping into the sim world. What I remember is the Nürburgring 24, where he was obviously driving with the Porsche 24 by Redline crew. And unfortunately there, a small mistake on the very last sector before you get to the Dottinger cost them, I think, what they were running in second place at that point. So hopefully get a little bit more of the repetitions in, a little bit more practice, and it will go well. And 2 solid additions to the Coanda crew. Final topic we're going to discuss here today, though. We're in week 13, Connery, which usually means a new iRacing build. However, with this one-off leap season, trying to just adjust the schedule back to a normal cadence for the iRacing staff, this is a 14-week season. And so the new build is going to be released next Wednesday, accommodating for the eNASCAR and the Road to Pro races that happen on Tuesday night. But it's a big build coming in, and I'm just going to run down a quick preview, and we can dive into this a little bit more once I've run through all the stuff that's coming. We've got an LMP2 car. It's a huge one. LMP2 car, Dallara P217, announced just this morning. Going to be joining it is the Corvette C7 GTE car, which is absolutely amazing news.
I love that car. I love the C6R in iRacing, and it was one of my favorite cars on the service, in the GT1 category, and to have the successor, shall we say, in the GTE category, that's going to be a car that I'll get my wheel out for again, I think.
Well, we saw, if you were watching on one of our video streams, you got a great shot of the car in sim that I hadn't actually seen before. Super, super exciting stuff. We've got 2 tracks being released as well. The Crandon Dirt Track, which I know a lot of the dirt fans are excited for. You also have the Nashville Fairgrounds, which I guess NASCAR fans will be excited for as well. Some other updates coming. Tire compounds and a complete tire overhaul for the McLaren F1 car. Going to be very interesting to see how that one works. Then we got a huge update here, and the one that I'm personally, I think, the most excited for, trackside noises. You've got all sorts of new ambient sounds that are going to be included, track locations. So, for example, a track like Road America, you might hear some of the insects in the forest. If you go to somewhere like the Knoxville Dirt Track, you'll hear all the street noises since it's in the middle of the city. You've got the paddock pit sounds, you've got the pit PA, you've got the pit alarm, which you would obviously hear at the Nürburgring Nordschleife for the general PA. You've got crowd noises, and I think we have to just call out all the people here, Connery, because this is a big push. It was the push to X Audio 2 has really enabled this, and I'm just going to call out all the staff here because I want to say a really, really big thank you. So thank you to Aussie Greg, talented audio engineer. Thank you to Jeff Rubin, Grant Reeve, David Tucker for sim engineering, and then art and production, Kevin Combs, Kevin Iannarelli, and Jake Poulon. Thank you so much, because this is going to be just a total game changer, Connery, because you're now really going to feel like you're in that atmosphere of a race. You're going to hear the crowd rumbling when a crash occurs. You'll hear them, peaking up. It's going to just really bring another dynamic element to the iRacing simulator.
It's going to be great for the immersion. So the VR fans are going to rejoice as well, especially with the 3D audio as you move your head and everything. But it's going to be awesome. Of course, with X Audio 2 updates as well, potentially, because I noticed in the In the LMP2 video, there was a lot of nice reverb going on with the off the track and off the walls and things like that. So that's going to be insane. We're going to have to adjust all of our levels for our campbacks. that's for certain. But yeah, it's going to be insane. And this is just the stuff that has been publicly announced right now. Like there is more more coming. There's probably more specifics going to come. So we got to wait for those full patch notes to come through. We had that surprise announcement of the new Corvette coming, which no one had considered was going to happen whatsoever. That really came out of left field. And if iRacing are being like that just a week or so before, maybe there'll be some surprises in the patch notes as well. I don't know.
Well, I don't want to get anyone's hopes up here, so please don't clip this and then come back in a week's time. However, I've heard rumblings, rumblings that I can confirm that there is a new car that might very well be announced in the next week to come as part of this new build.
I was just joking about what I said. I don't actually know if there's any new content, but
I don't know for sure.
Then...
I don't know for sure either, and I want to make that clear. This is a rumor that I've been able to partially substantiate. However, I'm very excited, and I think we can talk a little bit about the Corvette just quickly, because obviously the history between iRacing and Pratt and Miller, it always sounded like any future Corvette was going to be a no-go, and I think it's fair to say in some ways here that it's one of the positive things that we might have seen come out of the last few months, because obviously with all the IMSA iRacing events that were held, we didn't get to see any of the GM cars or the GM drivers.
Yes.
Well, now if there's any future events that happen in iRacing, even in the off season, not necessarily due to a lockdown, those drivers are going to be able to compete. And I'm very thankful and grateful that iRacing and Pratt and Miller were able to work together to get all this data, because Connery, they weren't able to go and scan the car this time. So Pratt and Miller have to get full credit for bringing the car into the iRacing service.
They were kind of forced into it, though, in a way, because of all the IMSA virtual broadcasts, they weren't able to have their drivers compete, as far as I know. So they kind of missed out on a big opportunity there. So it's not really a surprise now that they're thinking, oh, iRacing, you can actually have our data and have our scans and everything, instead of being reluctant to do so for the longest while, ever since, of course, we had the C6R and any other GM cars on the service afterwards. It was just kind of, maybe at some point, we don't know. It depends on whether they want to actually give us the data and actually give us opportunity to scan it. But it's a change. It's a change for the better now. Maybe opens up a couple more possibilities as far as manufacturers go, especially on the GT racing. So it's a great thing. GM seeing what they missed out on, I suppose. And maybe, of course, it sort of fleshes out more that GTE category as well, which is brilliant to see. The more, as far as I'm concerned, the more options that we have in each category, the better, because it's just going to be more immersive. It's going to be more realistic. You'll have series and teams from real life wanting to actually compete in it because their car is in it. It always felt a bit weird, for example, seeing Team Fordzilla compete in a Ferrari that one time. It was kind of odd. But once they're once those options are there, and hopefully, fingers crossed, iRacing at some point increase the amount of different cars that are allowed in a session. I know there's some technical challenges around that, but I think it's going to be a requirement sooner rather than later with the amount of cars in each category that we're getting.
Well, I suspect there's been a lot of talk about that, actually, Connery, because obviously the introduction of a new GTE car would necessitate dropping one of the current ones in some of the other series. However, obviously the last build cycle, the minimum requirement for iRacing was bumped up a little bit. So now you require, the minimum requirements are 16 gigabytes of RAM. So I just wonder if that was starting to build up to something like this. Sorry, go ahead.
16. I got to upgrade the production PC as well.
So we're going to have to buy you another 16 gigs. But one more...
I have slots for it. It's fine.
There we go. One more announcement that we do need to just quickly talk about, in my opinion, because this is a big one. The announcement that what was previously referred to as the iRacing Beta UI is now referred to as the iRacing UI. And as of this build, it is going to be the focal point for all future development. And just to clarify that, Connery, if you want to do races and stuff like that, that's now going to require the iRacing UI. However, if you're maybe out of the home and, on your laptop just trying to look at results or something, all of that stuff is still going to be available through the web UI. So a big change here. It's been a long time coming, and I'm quite excited for this because it does. The one thing that I think a lot of people need to just remember is iRacing has said that, especially for special events, to try and reduce the load on their servers, this new iRacing UI is much better technically designed, and it's just going to hopefully have more and more improvements. And I know users might not appreciate the UX right now, but I think we're a little bit accustomed to the web UI, which I don't think you can say that's overall a very modern UI. So a new way of doing things, a bit of an adjustment period, but definitely an exciting update here.
It's the quote unquote beta UI that's been in beta for about 5 years at this point, or at least it feels like. It's getting better and better, and I think they are kind of towards the stage now where they can actually do something like this, move everyone over. Some people are going to kick up a stink. You know how people are. It's the case of something that they're used to doing is going to change, and people tend to have bad reactions to that. But I think it's sorely needed, especially with the architectural improvements, with the signing up to a race. Makes it a little bit easier for the special event servers to just deal with it, because the way it had been designed previously wasn't optimal, and it caused a lot of delays when starting up special event sessions when you had like 1,000 people signing up for a race. So that benefit is going to be there. Of course, it's a lot more modern, lot more slick look as well. Whenever I look at the iRacing member site, I'm reminded of mid to late 2000s web design, and it's well, that was when it was created, so it was it's a product of its time, and people have that familiarity. But it's iRacing's been a thing for 12 years at this point. It's that's 12 years of muscle memory that you kind of need to unlearn. But I think it's sorely needed, like I said, and it's going more towards the way games are designed now. It's like, it was a weird thing having to launch the game through the web app. That was a completely strange thing, and now, of course, everything's going to be packaged into that normal UI. It's more of a standard way of doing it, and it might even see some, especially users of Steam, for example, we're always confused about, wait, I'm trying to start it up, but I need to launch things from the website, and it's not all in the UI, and the UIs, like, they don't have feature parity and whatever. So there's just a lot of confusion from that side, and just to pile everything into one and basically force everyone to move over, I think is the only option that iRacing had, because there's always going to be those people that hold out.
So a huge build, and that's all the stuff that we know about. Still a week to go. There could be a few more little things slipped in there, but that's going to be it here for the third episode of Talking Tents. Just want to preview the events coming up on RaceBot TV in the next few days. In a few hours' time, if you're watching live, you can join Paul Smith and David Haynes for 60-plus racing adventures, round 12 from the Nordschleife. Then this coming Friday, we've got the IndyCar iRacing series, as well as Friday night primetime. Normal time for both those series. Then on the weekend, a huge Saturday, we've got the Porsche Esports Super Cup and the Virtual Racing School stream, which we do on the Virtual Racing School Twitch. We also have the Deutsche Sim Racing Championship, which you'll be able to catch on Nürburgring TV. Then Sunday, Classic IndyCar Series, Porsche Sport Carrera Cup. You don't want to miss either of them. It's going to be a huge weekend for RaceBot TV. Just a reminder, if you're watching on RaceBot's Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, please go ahead and like and subscribe. It tells us that we're doing the right things over here. And if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms that we're continuing to roll out to, please do go follow us there as well. It just gives us a little boost in numbers. And like I say, tells us that we're doing the right thing. As always, my name is Arjuna Kankipati. I've been joined by veteran esports commentator Connery Maddock, with our producer Hugo Luis down in the production booth making it all happen. We'll see you in a few weeks' time for round number 4. In the meantime, enjoy this upcoming race, Porsche Esports Super Cup from the Nürburgring Nordschleife this coming weekend. Have a good one.